Hey, and welcome back to my channel. I'm going to be doing something a little bit different today, and I'm going to be talking about books that I think have really good mental health rep in them. Since it is Mental Health Awareness Month, I just felt like I couldn't let the month go by without sharing some books that I feel like really represent mental health issues or great therapy representation, or just like big mental health topics that I think are really important that's displayed in these books. All the books, I think, except for one I'll be mentioning today, are fiction, and then there's one nonfiction. But yeah, I'm really excited to talk about these books with y'all, and let's get started. Okay, so first on my list is a book that I've talked about before, and that's Not About a Boy by Maya Hollis. I talked about this in my 2024 favorites video, and if you haven't read it, it starts off describing it as she thought she'd found happiness once in a love that ended in tragedy and nearly sent her over the edge. Now at 17, Mel is beginning to piece her life back together. Under the supervision of Laurel Child Services, the exclusive foster care agency that raised her, Mel is sober and living with a new family among Manhattan's elite. It's her last chance at adoption before she ages out of the system, and she promised this time she'll try. But a casual relationship with a boy is turning into something she never intended for it to be, causing small cracks in her carefully constructed walls. Then the sister she has no memory of contacts Mel, unearthing complicated feelings about the past and what could have been. As the anniversary of the worst day of her life approaches, Mel must weather the rising tides of grief and depression before she loses herself and those close to her all over again. So I mentioned this book, I think, that has great mental health representation because it covers depression in a way that is raw and gritty. It doesn't sugarcoat it at all. It doesn't make it seem fun by any means necessary. It also talks about addiction in a way that's very real and raw as well too. And Mel actually ends up going to a mental health hospital and talks about her experience while there as well too. It's not often that you see mental health hospital representation in books, but it was very interesting, and I think it added a bigger layer to the story. Again, not glamorized in any particular way at all. It was just straight, raw, her experience being there and all the feelings that she had to navigate through. Also, she's navigating through grief in many forms. I think that that's another great representation that's highlighted in this book. So I definitely recommend it if you are someone that wants to just kind of understand depression or addiction from a different perspective or from a bigger perspective. I think Not About a Boy does a really good job of representing that for sure. Next is Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. This book is one of my all-time favorites from her. It holds a very special place in my heart. And if you haven't read it before, here's what it's about. Their love was supposed to last forever, but when life delivered blow after devastating blow, Yasmin and Josiah Wade found that love alone couldn't solve or save everything. It couldn't save their marriage. Yasmin wasn't prepared for how her life fell apart, but she's finally starting to find joy again. She and Josiah have found a new rhythm, co-parenting their 2 kids and running a thriving business together. Yet like magnets, they're always drawn back to each other, and now they're beginning to wonder if they're truly ready to let go of everything they once had. Soon, one stolen kiss leads to another, and then more. It's hot, it's illicit, it's all good until old wounds reopen. Is it too late for them to find forever, or could they even be better the second time around? So this is a second chance romance, as you can hear. But what I think is done so well is grief. So Yasmin and Josiah sadly lose a child, and that adds to their complicated relationship. And we see Yasmin's grief very raw, portrayed in the book. And Josiah as well, we see his grief and it looks differently, of course. And he also seeks therapy for himself. I loved the therapist in this book a lot. And again, that's very rare for me to say. I felt like the insight was very real, definitely felt like this was someone's actual therapist instead of, an idealized version of therapy. It also talked about just their communication style with each other, conversations about forgiveness, of course. And then again, those themes of grief are very relevant in this book in many forms. So yes, this is one book where I was like, oh, the therapy representation in here is spot on. And if you read anything by Kennedy Ryan, you know that she likes to interview people and make sure that she's getting the right information before writing particular characters. So I think she mentioned that she interviewed a bunch of therapists to make sure that she got the voice down and knew what a therapist would say and what they wouldn't say. So I, for one, really appreciated that. But yeah, I love this book as well. I think it has great therapy representation, great grief representation. Again, very raw. This one too. Next is a book that y'all already know how I feel about, and that's Isaac's Song by Daniel Black. Again, Great therapy representation. Love, love, love the therapist. Daniel Black said that he didn't actually interview any therapists when writing this character, which I think is interesting because he got the voice down amazingly. What is another good representation in this book is grief, as well as identity exploration and depression as well too. I think when someone is trying to really feel connected and grounded in their identity, it can bring up a lot, right? There's a sense of like loss. There's a sense of not knowing how to express yourself. And then there's also a feeling of not being accepted by those around you, right? Which is all stuff that's covered in Isaac's song. And I thought that representation again was pretty spot on. And the grief representation too was also pretty spot on in both ways, right? Because he's talking about the loss of his father in this book, but we also get to see his expression of the loss of his mother as well, and how he's grieving both of these parents very differently, right? He has the support of a therapist as he's trying to navigate the grief in regards to his father, whereas he didn't have one when he lost his mother. And his version of grief then versus how he's dealing with grief now, different, right? So I think this is a great book for representation as well too, mental health representation in many different ways. Now I know I just talked about this book as well too because it just came out recently, but Audrey and Bash Are Just Friends by Tia Williams. I really liked the conversations around perfectionism, anxiety, as well as panic attacks. It wasn't something that was just like thrown into the book and then forgotten about. It kind of follows Audrey and Bash throughout the book. It wasn't like just like this thing that happened once and that was it. It was a continued piece of the story and piece of Audrey's identity, right? Of like, she always feels like she needs to be the caretaker and she's not really sure what her role or identity is outside of that, right? And she's able to understand that in this book, and hopefully as she continues to grow into her own person, she's able to build her identity outside of that and accept herself outside of just needing to be people's caretaker and to be the one to drop everything to be there for other people. So I really like that as well. And then the description again of panic attacks was pretty spot on. They talked about certain coping skills that you can use when you are having a panic attack. I love, love, love that in this book. I thought it was a great conversation piece, but also could give a lot of tips to folks who might be struggling with panic attacks and anxiety and have no idea about how they can kind of ease some of those symptoms that come up for them. So I know I just read this one and it's very new, but I definitely think the mental health rep in this one is also really great. Next is Rootless by Crystal Zara Apia. I just want to say that there was a time when I first finished this book where I couldn't talk about it without bursting into tears. So there's that. But if you have not read this book before, here is what Rootless is about. One spring afternoon in London, Sam races up the stairs to his flat, 2 at a time. There's 1,300 pounds missing from the bank account he shares with his wife, F.A., and his calls are going straight to voicemail. When he finally reaches someone, he learns that F.A. is over 4,000 miles away as their child looks around and asks, "Where's mommy?" When F.A. and Sam met as teens headed for university, it seemed that everyone knew they were meant to be. F.A., newly arrived in the UK from Ghana and sinking under the weight of her parents' expectations, found comfort in the focused and idealistic Sam. He was stable, working toward a law career, and had an unwavering vision for their future. A vision that F.A., a decade later, finds slightly insufferable. From the outside, they're the picture-perfect couple everyone imagined, but there are cracks in the frame. When F.A. and Sam are faced with an unplanned pregnancy, they find themselves on opposing sides. Fatherhood is everything Sam has dreamed of, but F.A. feels stuck in a nightmare. And when yet another revelation emerges, they are forced to confront just how radically different they want their lives to be. Already swallowed by the demands of motherhood and feeling her dreams slipping away once again, F.A. disappears. Yeah, this book, it's a book that I will never read again because it was just so devastating for many reasons. So in this book, I think it has really great identity representation in regards to perfectionism and societal and cultural expectations. You know, being able to decide what you actually want for yourself versus what has been kind of like instilled in you through culture and society is definitely represented in this book in a really, really great way. Also depression, like F.A. struggled with depression throughout the beginning of the book, and that was portrayed in many different ways. And then she also struggled with postpartum depression, but didn't know how to talk about it or what she was actually really navigating through. She just knew that motherhood felt like a lot for her and she was losing herself in it. And her husband, Sam, just could not see it. He couldn't empathize with her because he was just so excited to be, you know, the father that went to work and came home, got to be a father, went back to work the next day, so on and so forth. So yeah, I think this book has great postpartum depression representation. I think it has great identity representation. There's also themes of grief in this one as well too. Loved this book, but woo, it's a heavy one if you pick it up, just trust me. But yeah, great mental health rep in this one as well. Next is another book that I could, after I finished reading it, if I were to like talk about it with someone, I would get so teary. That's Small Joys by Elvin James Mensah. If you have not read this book before, let me read what's about to you. It's 2005 and Harley has dropped out of college to move home, back to rural England where he works a dead-end job at a movie theater. Estranged from his father and finding every attempt at happiness futile, Harley's on the verge of making a devastating final decision. Fortunately for him, things don't go according to plan, and his attempt on his own life is interrupted by his new roommate, Muddy. Muddy is everything Harley is not. Ostensibly heterosexual, freewheeling, confident in his masculinity. Despite their differences, a deep friendship blossoms between them when Muddy takes Harley under his wing and shows him everything that in his eyes makes life worth living. Bird watching, karaoke, rugby, and the band Oasis. But this newfound friendship is complicated. It has enormous repercussions for the pair's romantically tangled friend group, for Chelsea, an overbearing striver whose generosity they begrudgingly rely on, for Finley, her raffish and uncouth boyfriend, and for Naraya, who despite her simmering confidence is smarting from a series of unreturned affections. And then there's a violent affair with an older man that Harley finds himself slipping back into. As secrets and jealousies endanger all that Harley has come to depend on, he finds himself faltering once again, even though he finally has something and someone to live for. I can talk about it now. It's been a couple years. Small Joys is a fantastic book on representation in many different ways. It talks about depression representation, again, in a way that's not glamorizing, not sugarcoating, very raw, very deep. There is suicidality in this book and suicide attempt in this book as well too, in a way that is difficult to read and to sit with, but again, I think is a very honest portrayal of depression and what it means to kind of lose hope in yourself and the world around you. I think that is discussed very well in this book. And the friendship between Muddy and Harley is just so beautiful. It brought me to tears many, many, many times. I think that the mental health representation is spot on. Again, doesn't sugarcoat it, very real, very raw, difficult at times. It took me a while to finish this book because like sometimes something would happen and I have to put it down and just kind of like reset. So this is my book right here. Next is Old Enough by Haley Jacobson. I read this book a couple years ago too. I really enjoyed it. I think it has great mental health rep as well. Let me read to you what it's about. Savannah, Sav, Henry, is almost the person she wants to be, or at least she's getting closer. It's the second semester of her sophomore year. She's finally coming out as bisexual, is making friends with other queers in her dorm, and has just about recovered from her disastrous first queer situationship. She is cautiously optimistic that her life is about to begin. But when she learns that Izzy, her best friend from childhood, has gotten engaged, Sav faces a crisis of confidence. Things with Izzy haven't been the same since what happened between Sav and Izzy's brother when Sav was 16. Now with the wedding around the corner, Sav is forced to reckon with trauma she thought she could put behind her. On top of it all, Sav can't stop thinking about Wes from her gender studies class, sweet funny Wes with their long eyelashes and green backpack. There's something different here with Wes, and with her new friends, it feels terrifyingly like they might truly see her. If you have not read this book, I definitely recommend it. I think the portrayal of trauma is, again, very real and deep and intense. And it's not just like one moment of trauma that Sav experienced, but everything that happened afterwards. I think it does a good job at showing how trauma sits with our body. And even if mentally we feel like we're in a good space, the moment that we're placed back into an environment that feels like the environment where the trauma happened for us, our body and mind just kind of like start to go back into that space. I think this book portrays that in a really, really great way. It's also a good exploration of identity and what it means to outgrow certain identities as well. And we see that with this book with Sav, because like with her college friends, she has become a new person. She's fully in her identity with them. She's fully accepted by them, and she feels safe and comfortable. But with her high school friends, right, they only know that version of her. that she's essentially released, but when she's back with them, there's an expectation that she's still that person. So I think that this book does a great job of showing just the struggles with evolving in your identity and then also not being fully accepted by those who may not want to see you evolve in your identity. Old Enough is another great book that I think has great mental health representation as well. Next is Our Shouts Echo by Jade Adia. I read this one last year. Another great mental health rep book. Let me read to you what it's about. 16-year-old Niara Holloway, only goal in life is to get through it unnoticed. That and to spend her first summer in LA building a doomsday bunker in her backyard. Because if the past few years have taught Niara anything, it's that the ocean levels are rising, minimum wage is a scam, and the people who are supposed to protect you will hurt you. Now, the only thing that helps Niara stay afloat and the constant waves of anxiety and existential dread that threaten to drag her under is her new mantra, be prepared. But Niara wasn't prepared for Mac Torres, not for his disarmingly cute face or for his surfer lifestyle, or for the way his smile resuscitates her heart. Mac is a bomb that blows Niara's world to pieces, but instead of disaster, he fills it with sunset bonfires, breakfast burritos, and new friends. For years, Niara's life has revolved around ignoring the demons of her past, avoiding the problems of her present, and preparing for the catastrophes of the future. Now Mac, with his sunshine laugh and infectious optimism, is determined to show her another way to be. But in a world where the worst feels inevitable, can one summer be enough to light the way to a hopeful future? Can one summer be enough to fall in love? So I, again, really love this book. I haven't really seen such a deep existential book from a young adult perspective ever, and this book definitely covered that. I think it has really great anxiety representation, and not in a way that we see typically when we're seeing anxiety being discussed. It shows what it feels like in the present, but to see someone that is trying to control her anxiety by preparing for the future as much as possible and going to any extreme to try to prepare for the future is something that I think we don't see often, but is definitely also a result of anxiety. And it comes from a space where Niara actually went through something that she was not prepared for, and that has simply terrified her. So from that experience, she's developed this belief that she needs to be prepared for anything at any time, just in case. And she lives in the just in case instead of the present until she meets Mac. So I think that's a great representation for anxiety for sure. And the characters are just so sweet. My last fiction book that I would recommend that I think has great mental health representation is another book that actually recently has just come out, and that's Immaculate Conception by Ling Ling Huang. If you know me, you know I love Natural Beauty, which is Ling Ling's first book. I talked about it incessantly. I think her writing is so beautiful and eerie. You just have to read to understand. Anyways, let me read to you about what Immaculate Conception is about. Anka meets Mathilde in art school and is instantly drawn to her. Mathilde makes art that feels truly original, and Anka, trying hard to prove herself in this fiercely competitive world, pours everything into their friendship. But when Mathilde's fame and success causes her to begin to drift away, Anka becomes desperate to keep her close. Enter Scaffold. Purported to enhance empathy, this cutting-edge technology could allow Anka to inhabit Mathilde's mind and access her memories, artistic inspirations, and deep-seated trauma. Undergoing this procedure would link Anka and Mathilde forever, but at what cost? I know it sounds a little bit spooky because it kind of is. Why I think this book has great mental health rep is because I think it shows a different side of trauma, in the sense of, I think we as a society feel like the best artists have the most traumatic lives and traumatic histories, and they're able to pour it into their art and we can connect to it, right? But we don't think about the artist in general. And I think that this book portrays that in a very beautiful and spooky way. Because Mathilde has experienced unimaginable loss, she's experienced so much trauma, and she's able to portray that pain into her work. And again, because I think humans are naturally drawn to expressions of pain, she's doing so well. Whereas Anka hasn't experienced any sort of level of trauma compared to Mathilde. She's just a natural genius. I'll never be as good as her. If I stay around her, maybe something will happen, right? Maybe I'll be able to express myself just in the same ways that she does, which is dangerous. And we see the dangers of that because now there's a potential opportunity for them to link themselves forever to where that Anka can have access to Mathilde's trauma and even hold it for her and help her heal it, allegedly. I think this is a great mental health book representation because of the ways that it talks about trauma and the ways that we commercialize and glamorize trauma. Immaculate Conception, Ling Ling Wong, great for that. Lastly is First in the Family by Jessica Hoppe. This is another book that I talked about in my favorites for 2024. And this is the nonfiction book that I was talking about as well. Let me read to you what it's about. When Hoppe started drinking and started documenting her journey online, she never imagined sobriety would be her legacy. For a first-gen daughter of Latinx immigrants, the promise of the American dream to be exceptional, a hashtag Latina genius, was the ultimate goal. Sharing her struggles with alcohol meant being vulnerable and revealing emotional truths, and the journey was often lonely. Then during the first year of quarantine, drug overdoses spiked, the highest number ever recorded. Hoppe's cousin was one of them. I never learned the true history of substance use disorder in my family, Hoppe writes. People just disappeared. By the time of her cousin's death at the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic, Hoppe had been in recovery for nearly 4 years and still hadn't told a soul. She decided it was time to stop feeling ashamed and to finally come clean about her journey, the first in her family to do so. I think, of course, like this covers addiction, specifically for people of color and how it's discussed and treated and stigmatized in our country. It talks about the stigmas that are like carried around deciding to be sober as well too. It also talks about what intergenerational addiction looks like and the silence that's often attached to addiction in families, right? Like we're not naming what it actually is. We're just kind of like, that's just how they are, or they're just having a good time, right? Lots of just kind of like normalizing things that are truly addiction. I think this has great mental health representation for many reasons, especially now. I think addiction is something that is so serious in our country. And if we don't start to name it, and if we don't start to talk about it and normalize conversations around it, it's going to continue in the direction that it's going in right now. So I do think this book is great for mental health representation on the addiction front, but also in the identity front as well too. Jessica talks about like what it's like to develop her own beliefs and her own goals for herself outside of family expectations, cultural expectations, and societal expectations as well too. Releasing the need to be perfect and to be constantly achieving, right? Which is tough, right? If you're coming from a different cultural background or you're just a person of color in general. But yeah, I think that representation is very clear in this book. And I really do think it's a great memoir and just gives you a lot to think about if you're someone that either is struggling with addiction or just like struggling with the ability to feel grounded in your identity and your goals for yourself, even if it is directly against what society, cultural, family expectations have been placed on you. So yeah, another good one. So yeah, those are just some of the books that I think have really great mental health representation, whether it be through grief, identity, different diagnoses, therapy, or just like big existential questions. I think a lot of those books I would definitely recommend if you're someone that enjoys reading about anything along those lines. Mental Health Awareness Month is a month, but of course like mental health and taking care of your mental health is a daily practice. And a lot of people don't have the resources or the tools or the language to describe their experiences. And that is why I'm always recommending fiction books, because being able to see a character navigate through life or these mental health struggles that you are trying to understand for yourself can not only validate your experience, but it can maybe even give you the encouragement to seek treatment, or the encouragement to tell people how you're feeling, or the encouragement to just see life from a different perspective. I do think that if you're open to it, fiction books can give you so much, especially for mental health reasons. I do hope that you found this list to be helpful. If you've read on any of these books, please let me know. I'd love to discuss them with you in the comments. Or if you have any other books that you've read that you think have really good mental health rep, I'd love to see those too so I can add them to my never-ending TBR list. But yeah, if you've made it this far in this video, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you. And in honor of Mental Health Awareness Month, I hope that you're able to take extra care of yourself, especially right now. There's so much going on in the world. I mean, so much that is a lot to carry and a lot to navigate and a lot to understand. So I do hope that you're being extra careful, patient, and understanding of yourself, even if it's just for this month. I do hope that you're able to do that. But yeah, I will see you in the next video.